It's been 70 days of campaigning. The leaders blaring their messages through every loudspeaker, television, radio, and social network they can find. And it all comes down to this week. At the end of a long, exhausting road, whatever is left of historic amount of campaign money gets spent now.
If you're ready for change, I'm ready too.
Stephen Harper says I'm not ready.
Is Justin ready?
The air war is intensifying. The latest Conservative ads focus on the safety and prosperity of a Harper government, and they target Justin Trudeau.
You work hard, worry about everything going on in the world, but Justin hasn't thought that through. Justin.
In English and French, Trudeau was portrayed as clueless, an amateur, and niqab lover. In these ads, Tom Mulcair is nowhere.
Unlike Mr. Trudeau's plan, my plan is built to last.
The NDP are focused on Trudeau too, Mulcair claiming the banner of change.
Pharmacare, healthcare, childcare, Mulcair.
But the Liberals are targeting voters in the now vulnerable NDP bastion of Quebec.
Il nous a amenés vers un avenir meilleur.
And in their English ads, Trudeau is playing up the image of momentum.
We have the chance to beat fear with hope.
Managing Canada's economy isn't a popularity contest.
Maybe not, but a leader's personal popularity can be a factor.
We're going to vote for anyone that's not Harper.
And the anti-Harper vote is getting organized like never before on strategic voting websites that riding by riding tell you who to vote for to beat the Conservatives. I'm joined by our panelists. Jonathan Kay is editor-in-chief at Walrus Magazine. Tasha Carradine is a columnist with the National Post and iPolitics. And John Moore is a talk radio host in Toronto, but he joins us from Montreal tonight. Hi, John.
Hey.
So we'll get to the websites and the ads in just a moment, but overall, a week left. Well, a week tomorrow, we'll find out who wins this thing. What do the parties have to do in this last crazy week, Tasha?
Well, as you mentioned, there's the air war, but there's also the ground game, and there are very many different ground games playing out across this country, in every province, in every riding. So they have to really get out their vote, target those micro messages to communities, individuals, go to the base level to make sure that all their voters come out. That said, they also have to not slip up and hope their opponent does. So if there are any bombs they can throw in this campaign to destabilize the other campaigns, specifically the Liberals who seem to have momentum, that's the time to do it.
So some bomb throwing. What are you looking for, John? In Montreal?
I'm watching to see the Liberals not screw it all up because they have so far, with 70 days in, the Conservatives bet that Justin was going to screw it all up, and it hasn't happened yet. As a matter of fact, you're right. You talked about the momentum. That huge rally they had last weekend in Toronto was then turned into a series of commercials, and it's very sort of almost Bobby Kennedy-like. You know, Trudeau, the young guy in his shirt sleeves, talking to the crowd, the soaring voice. So he does have the momentum. And, you know, Mulcair, I don't know if there's anything Mulcair can do, and I sense that the Conservatives are sort of at that point. I think it was Joe Pesci in a movie where he shoots a guy and he empties all of the bullets out of his gun and then just throws the gun at the guy because he figures that's all he's got.
What are you going to watch for, John?
Look, I think the candidates have to terrify their supporters about the prospect of the other guy winning. So for Harper, it means terrifying voters into thinking that, you know what, if Trudeau wins, he's going to raise your taxes, the economy is going to tank, and your kid's school teacher is going to wear a niqab. In the case of Mulcair and Trudeau, they're going to have to scare people into saying, look, if you don't go to the polls, you're going to have at least 4 more years of Harper. So it's the fear comes into it in the last week, and they have to present dark scenarios if people don't go to the polls.
Yeah, but they're not doing all dark scenarios. That's what's interesting. The Conservatives are certainly doing the dark scenario. They're saying with the dark colors and the moody music that if Trudeau gets in, it's basically the end of the world. The other parties, and especially the Liberals, are playing on this sort of hope versus fear. So I think it's actually an interesting contrast in the messages in the last week.
I think it's interesting for Trudeau in that you showed a brief clip from the Brampton rally near Toronto. I think he used the term fear 4 times.
Beating fear.
Exactly. So saying Harper has a politics of fear. That's what he wants to inflict on Canadians. There's another line there saying Harper has never missed a chance to divide Canadians. So he's sort of flipping it around and saying, look, do you want more years of division and fear? Because that's the scenario Canada is in for if Harper gets another mandate.
So, John, you've been watching the ads, watching the messages. What struck you in the last, well, it's not the last barrage, there's still a few days to go in these ads. What are they going after?
Well, I mean, it's such an incredible number of commercials, and something that is really quite notable is how you don't even have to buy time anymore. You can just make an ad, throw it up on your website, then people like me talk about it, then people go to the website and look at it. One thing I find particularly clever, and you only hear this if you're listening to radio, is the Prime Minister's done a series of commercials where he says it is this day in October, and he finishes with talk tomorrow, and it's kind of cozy. It's kind of a Stephen Harper we've never heard before. Mulcair, again, seems prime ministerial, but also seems to be on the sidelines of the whole thing. And I think that the Liberals have been very clever. It was a long game. They said they wouldn't go negative, and for the most part, they haven't.
So is that working, do you think, Tasha?
Well, the Liberals have momentum for a number of reasons. I'm not sure if the ads have necessarily played into it. There have been all sorts of other things. But they, I think, are deliberately avoiding that fear in the sense of them painting a fear. I think a lot of people who are wanting to find the anti-Harper are looking for someone who projects that sunny message. And Justin Trudeau, that has been his strength since the beginning. And that's why he's been accused of actually being a lightweight until the start of this campaign in particular, because that's what he was offering. But it seems now, because they've offered a platform as well, you can combine the two. So I find that they're definitely taking that sort of Obama-esque, I won't go Kennedy necessarily, but that Obama-esque thing of vote for us, hope versus fear attitude.
We talked a lot last week about the issue of the niqab rearing its big head in this election campaign. Last week, a number of ads, particularly in Quebec, in French, playing off of the niqab issue. We don't see that in English. And maybe it's the end of, I mean, you were talking about fear. Is it working? Is it time for them to back off?
You know, it's really interesting because there's a Quebec ad. There's no narration. It's just words. And it's all about the niqab. The words are in French. It's aimed at French voters in Quebec. And if you listen, the soundtrack for me was telling, because the soundtrack is like from an apocalyptic 1980s sci-fi movie. And there's this idea that somehow it's like a force beyond words, and that the niqab is kind of like a polyester Darth Vader thing, and that it's like this force that's out there and is evil, and that Harper's going to confront and Trudeau's not going to confront. But it's done in such an ominous way that I actually found it very disturbing, and I find it disturbing that they're still going on it, at least in Quebec. I think the rest of the country, they've correctly sensed that it's not going to work, but in Quebec, apparently they still think it has traction.
Well, they think it has traction because it has worked. And the Bloc Québécois also has...
Why is Trudeau up in the polls?
No, in Quebec, though, the NDP vote has gone down. That was the focus that they were having. And the Bloc Québécois had an ad out as well with a drop of oil turning into a niqab. So they're not the only party that's been going on that. But I take your point on the darkness of it. And that's one thing that surprised me, too. Even in the English ads, Mr. Harper is saying, coming down to the micro level, if you don't vote for me, your family will be worse off. He's really pushing the sense of, if it's the Conservatives, or else you won't be well off under Justin Trudeau. So again, it's positive, but it's actually a negative message underlying it.
Yeah, I think a lot of these things, though, are kind of ricocheting. Like the niqab thing, I think somehow the government didn't blow up in their face, but somehow they stepped a little bit too far, and Canadians are starting to feel a bit ashamed of it. And Justin Trudeau had a line in his speech at that famous Brampton rally where, again, he went after the Conservatives saying, Stephen Harper tells you that the economy will collapse without him. And he said the economy doesn't rely on him, it relies on you. And I think, it's almost turning into this, I'm rubber and you're glue, and what doesn't stick to you. I mean, it's working for Justin.
Let's talk now about the anybody but Harper movement. And there's nothing terribly unusual about that. After you've been in power for a long time, these things happen a lot. It happened to Brian Mulroney. But I guess in the past, these movements were fronted by people. You had Danny Williams, the Premier of Newfoundland, who had a very famous movement against Harper in the last election. But now you've got these websites where you, if you haven't seen them, you basically put your postal code into the website, and it tells you if you want to defeat Harper, you vote for this party versus that party. John, what do you think of these websites? Will they have any impact?
I don't think so, actually. On the web, everything is ramped up to 11. Everybody's mad about a deadline for 2 weeks and missing girls for 2 months, and then everybody goes back to where they were. I don't believe that there's that many people out there who are going to use a website like this in order to strategically vote that could change the results. I just don't buy it. I mean, who goes to websites like this anyway, but the young who generally don't vote?
I disagree with that. I think people will use these websites. It is, like you said, Wendy, a phenomenon that is not new. new, but it's organized. This is the first time we've seen this really more organized, targeted thing. And there are some ridings. I went through them on the website for fun. Some that there's no hope, even if you voted for the candidate that got the second most votes in the last election, like Dufferin-Caledon in Ontario. They say vote Green. Well, the leading candidate got over 28,000 votes and the second 8,000. It won't matter. But some races are very close. And I think in those close races, if enough people pay attention to this, and not just the 20-year-olds who don't vote, but the people who do vote, I think it could matter.
I think it's a great idea, and I think it will have an effect. The nightmare scenario for NDP and Liberals is that you'll have ridings where it's 35% for Harper, 30% for Trudeau, 30% for Mulcair, 5% for the Greens. And the websites help cure what is in effect one of the worst aspects of the first past the post system, which is where you have people whose primary motivation is to vote out the incumbent. It's a referendum on the incumbent, but they don't know who to vote for. And this technology actually helps people decide who to vote. So I actually am optimistic, and maybe this will be one of the things that helps convince young people to vote, because now they'll say, my vote really does matter, and here's a website that shows me how to do it.
So, John, are you feeling very old at this moment?
No, I'm always crapping on the internet. I just don't see it. I don't know that the data is all that relevant, and I just don't see enough people using it that it would ever make a difference.
Are you feeling sorry for Stephen Harper and all of this stuff?
I'm not feeling sorry. I mean, look, the Conservatives have, in this campaign, they have made a couple of mistakes in this campaign, I think, or reacted to events in ways that didn't necessarily help them. And what does upset me, in a sense, is the vilification of individuals you see. And you mentioned Brian Mulroney earlier as well, that after a period of time, when a leader is demonized in this way, in this case after 9 years, what does it say also about the political culture we have, and how people can be so angry at an individual after he's done a lot of things, and you may not agree with all of them, but many of them have been very good.
Is he demonized here, John?
I think to a certain extent, Tasha is right, that people project on Harper all the things they don't like about the country.
Yeah.
And by the way, exactly the same thing happened to the Liberals in the latter years of the Chrétien-Martin era, when you had Conservatives. I worked at the National Post at the time. I mean, they just projected everything they didn't like about Canada on Chrétien. Chrétien became the sort of boogeyman, even though he was actually a fairly good prime minister.
We are out of time, but John, lovely to see you in Montreal. We'll see you back on election eve next week.
I'll be there.
Yeah, and you too as well. Thanks so much.